Well, here we are right after the Chairman Powell question and answer, which was very weird. I mean, I can't remember the last time that the market went up when Chairman Powell was speaking. So this is a totally new thing. And I've got Larry Goldberg here to help me go through it, to think about it. But also, I have a great announcement to make. Larry, thank you very much. You have agreed to become the Monday night co-host.
Well, I hope people put up with it. I mean, this is not really my strong suit.
You've done fine. Otherwise, I wouldn't be asking you back. So yes, on Monday through Thursday, of course, the new show is going to be to take a look at where the markets are and what's happened with Tesla during the day. What is the news of the day? Just like I do every morning at 7:10 California time. This will be about 5:10 every night. And Larry, I'm trying to get a co-host for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, because of course, Larry is already the co-host on Good News Friday, which is a slightly different show. So anyway, Larry, thank you for jumping on board with this new way that I'm going to run the show. So, all right, the markets jumped as Powell was speaking. It was pretty much a perfect question and answer period. We had a perfect morning with the ADP jobs numbers. And then only slightly higher than expected September job openings at 9.5 versus 9.4 estimated million. Bond yields dropped 11 basis points on the 10-year and the 2-year. The inversion is still really big, but the bonds were down heavily and are down again in the pre-market. So that's the 2-month inversion, however, is almost 70 basis points. So Larry, on a great day for the market, and the market was up too. Tesla up 5 points during the regular hours, and I think up another 1.5 or 2 points during the after hours. So what's the complaint about? I mean, everything's wonderful.
Well, the market's breathing a sigh of relief. I mean, we're used to, months and months of Powell telling us just how bad life was. And now he's saying, well, maybe it isn't as bad as I made out. But the market had a really bad dose this week. We had Stan Druckenmiller telling us just how bad things were earlier this week in an interview. He's highly respected by the market. He's one of probably the best money manager in our time. And he didn't quite put it as rosy as that. In fact, he's he bought a bunch of 2-year bills. I mean, a bunch.
Okay.
Yeah, and in fact, he tells us it's a heavily leveraged position. So he didn't do so well tonight.
No, he didn't.
Yeah. But he's been very prescient, and he's very worried about the market. And the market really, labored for those 2 days. I think it was the Wednesday, the 2 days before Powell spoke today.
Oh.
And Powell gave us a lot of sense of, well, things are coming around. He didn't want to be too bullish. In fact, he wasn't too bullish, but, contrast it with his earlier conversation, it was like, guys, the sky's the limit. But we all know the sky isn't the limit right now. The Fed sits on a gigantic pile of debt or of the assets that they have to ultimately liquidate.
Right.
So debt in that sense. But if you look at the economy, things appear to be looking up. Druckenmiller tells us that we're going to have a hard landing. I'm kind of in his camp, as you know, but look, I've been wrong often, and I may be wrong again, but the signs are not great. Listen, one of the things he said, Druckenmiller said, that, Janet Yellen, should be hung, drawn. Well, he didn't say she should be hung, drawn, and quartered, but he said she made one of the worst decisions of any Secretary Treasury in history, not, selling debt,
Long bonds, yeah.
long bonds when time was available, when the time was right. And you've heard me repeat that again and again and again. So people don't want to hear me say that anymore. And he was right, but we are where we are, and we don't have that luxury. And so that's overhanging the market at all times.
Right.
And
so if we put aside for the moment, because I believe at the very least that can will be kicked down the road, one way or the other. Either the Treasury will, either the Fed will start to buy those bonds. I understand today there was a note out that said that the hedge funds are starting to buy the bonds. So that there's some relief coming from that direction, or the old people will start to buy the bonds. Anyway, there's possibilities of maybe China would have to get back into the bond buying business because their yen is so horrible right now. But with all those possibilities, the government does have a few levers to pull before the country would really go into the toilet. Whether that's the bond or whether that's the Fed or the Treasury. Why don't we take a look more carefully, though, at what Powell did say today?
Yeah.
I thought point one was, he says it's actually Fed policy now. He had hinted at this, but now it's actually Fed policy that part of the decision-making process is that the markets might create the necessary tight credit and financial conditions to slow the inflation so that the Fed doesn't have to raise interest rates anymore. I thought that was interesting that he's made it. Now the group, the Fed presidents and governors have decided that that is part of how they are going to respond to the market.
Yeah, and he's not wrong. He's not wrong. I mean, money supply is all of money supply, not just what the Fed does. The Fed can certainly prime it, and the Fed can certainly control it. But if as long as there's sufficient activity in the marketplace that's in the right direction, why should they? Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think you've said that quite often on this program, actually.
Oh no, I was finally right. It's twice.
Like a stop clock, right? But no, you said it. I mean, it's kind of a tautology, isn't it? So
yes, of course. Yeah. So I thought that was interesting. Number two, he said he didn't want to say it. He said, I don't want to say this, but it's going to be in the minutes anyway, so I might as well, that he no longer sees a recession. And I assume he means in 2024 or in the next 12 months, not forever, but I'm assuming that's roughly what he meant. So they've taken a recession off the table. I thought that was pretty interesting. He's not alone. A lot of other people that have been saying recession have now taken it off the table as well. Is that a good time to figure there's going to be one?
Yeah, I mean, Elon has said that there's probably a recession coming, and we're kind of in a slow rolling recession. Druckenmiller said it. He said it's going to be very nasty. I remain on that side of the equation. I can't see us avoiding a recession easily. I think I'm not sure the Fed can control it anymore. I think it was, in their power earlier this year, but I think they've let it slide too far. Now, a lot depends on the labor force, and a lot depends now on, some forces that we no longer control in the country because we're so exposed globally.
Right.
So Europe Whether Europe can dodge a recession or not, full-blown recession or not, I don't know. What happens in Ukraine is so important in this regard. And, a lot of people are talking down the wall and they're saying, oh, Ukraine's lost the war, blah, blah, blah. I don't believe that to be the case, but we're in a war.
We are. Two.
And it's two wars, two wars. And these circumstances are not really predictable. So what I'm saying is that nice that he's saying it. And by the way, it does give oxygen to the market, as you've seen. I think that more than anything, gave the oxygen to the market. Mm-hmm. The fact that he's not going to act, I mean, they knew he wasn't going to act, but the fact he's not talking about a raise, he's no longer stressing that there's going to be another raise, and the fact that he says that we're going to duck a recession, I think this is oxygen to the market. So there is going to be a few days of good market days. I don't know that we're in a long-term market.
Well, I did note that the guys that they poll in terms of what the Fed's plans are for December, which is only the next meeting is only 6 weeks away, but that's December meeting. That dropped all the way to 36% now that think there's going to be a raise in December. And I would be among those who think that, no, we're done with the raises unless there's some, significant number, and it can't be a 1 month number. He said that out loud, that it can't just be this one number. It needs a continuity of information that would say it's time to raise again.
Yeah, look, we all believe that the numbers are going to continue to improve on the inflation front. So I don't think there's a risk that he'll see the inflation rise and get all excited and do another raise, which I think is the only condition under which he would raise, and which was what he was scared of all along. So I don't think we're at risk of a raise, and I think that's why the market is feeling relief. Right. I think the risk is quite different.
Oh, yes, right. By the way, we do agree, that the federal spending and the debt is an issue. We don't disagree that it's a really significant issue. 100% in your camp on that. The only thing that I'm looking at is the timing, and I believe that it is. I mean, I'm no Biden fan, and I've admitted on this channel many times before, I'm a conservative. I'm not looking for the Democrats to take power, but I believe that we're not going to have a recession in an election year if it can be avoided by some kind of a lever.
That's true. That's absolutely true. But we have this fool of a Treasury Secretary, a fool of a Treasury Secretary, and I think a blunderer of a Federal Reserve Bank governor, blunderer of governor. But we don't have the sharpest tools in the toolbox running the show, but we do have an election, so they're going to have to temporize as best they can.
Yes,
at least Janet Yellen has to. But look, Trump was as big a spender, if not a bigger spender, than Biden. So who are we going to get? Are we going to get a Biden or a Trump? And if we do, maybe it's going to be even worse. So you're focused on this coming year. I'm focused on what's coming.
Yeah, I hear you. So he also said that there's now close to a balance between the risk of hurting the job market and the economy with too much tightening, and the risk of another round of inflation from not being tight enough. Whereas prior to this month, they felt the risk was higher on the side of inflation coming back. I thought this was maybe even more important than his statement that there was no recession coming.
You're right. And, he should have been looking at the trend towards this moment rather than waiting for the moment. So who knows? But at least he sees it now. And, we were seeing it a month ago, right?
Or months ago, yes.
Months ago, right.
He also said there will be no relaxation of quantitative tightening. So the other thing that you and I have talked about and agreed about is that at a certain point, you can dry up the cash. But apparently he's not terribly worried about that, and even said that the banks are in good shape, and that they're really working closely with the banks to make sure that they stay in good shape. No relaxation of quantitative tightening. That is not in his game book right now. Now, that would theoretically, to me, be the first thing they would do if they started to see a problem with bonds not being bought, or the bond rates getting too far out of control. They would start to buy bonds again.
Yeah, because their balance sheet hasn't got many bonds on it at all. So, they could buy as much as they like. Actually, Japan showed us that they can buy as much as they like. So maybe it's okay. Look, I mean, everything he said today was consistent where we were, months ago. I don't know how many months ago. I've kind of lost track, but we were saying a lot of this months ago, and I think we've lost a lot of important time.
Yes. Workers. Now, this sounds like Randy. See if you don't think this is. I'm not going to say. I'm not quoting him exactly, but roughly speaking, he said, workers having jobs and being paid at increasing rates that are increasing faster than inflation is creating more spending, which is creating more jobs. And then that this would, and then there was a hint in what he said that normally improving productivity would be the reason that this could happen, and that we would still have lower inflation even at a time when wages were inflating roughly a point or two above the inflation rate.
Powell, meet Keynes.
Yeah, okay, there you go.
This is pure Keynesian stuff. And, it's worked for 20, 30, 40 years. Look, it got us into the late 70s, into serious trouble. We got out of that trouble, and by the 90s, we were looking beautiful. I mean, in 2000, we had, Goldilocks economy. We're back in this whole Keynesian mess again.
Yeah, well, spending your way into it is not the way that I would do it. But I do believe that as we go forward, if we had 1.5%, 2% inflation, and we had 3% wage inflation for 4 or 5 years, that would probably be very good.
Yeah, that's true.
Because you want some inflation. You want some inflation to knock down the debt. I mean, it's the tax on the poor. I mean, the poor don't pay any actual taxes, so this is one way that we get to tax the poor.
Yeah,
but it sounds horrible, but it's true.
It's true. I mean, look, the debt in this country, the principal source of debt is not even the gigantic Federal Reserve Bank balance sheet, which is bad enough, but it is the potential debt, the potential cost of the of the pensions and the Social Security and Medicare.
Right.
And that cost is, the out years are scary,
right.
Really scary.
That one they're going to have to change. They have to change.
No choice. And this future generation is not me, it's my son and my daughter and their children who are going to have to pay the piper.
Right. So there are two ways to look at inflation, Larry, and one of those is to look at the actual inflation, to look at the actual numbers, and we look at Truflation all the time, which has been around 2.5 now for over 4 months. He says, of course, he's looking at inflation expectations, and I thought he made another piece of news today. He has multiple surveys and reports that he's looking at. We thought he was only looking at one. Turns out he's got multiple ways of looking at expectations, both of businesses and consumers, in order to figure out what are the inflation expectations, and that this is important to him.
Yeah, I'm not as surprised as you are. I mean, I know he's mentioned Truflation before. maybe he doesn't assign it as much weight as perhaps we do.
Right.
But yeah, I'm not surprised. I think the Fed, one of the things the Fed does well, really well, is statistics and measurement, and it does it really well. I mean, I know, happen to have some insight into that.
Okay.
And so, it's not that he doesn't have access to the depth and the breadth of the numbers. I just think that the school of thought that he's been focused on in the past was not probably the right one. I think, look, he's been in a sense, he's probably been worried about he's prioritized the wrong things, I think.
The wrong time. The timing is part of it, yeah.
Yes, and I think he's coming, more centrist and less. But he is such a political animal. He's been all over the map in terms of, what he believes in and who he looks at. But it's better now than it's been for a long time.
It is tough to be a prognosticator. No matter how often you're right, you're going to be wrong a high percentage of the time. Otherwise, why aren't you the richest man in the world? So he says the job market is still tight, but easing. Inflation's still too high, but going in the right direction, and the banks are in good shape. So I thought that was pretty optimistic. That was kind of one of his summary remarks. That's pretty optimistic from him.
Yeah, but let's look at a few of these things, because the participation in the market is not where it needs to be. And that's not being looked at all and focused on. So we have a lot of people who are choosing not to work.
And these are 27-year-olds who are in their mom's basements, right?
Right, and it's not reflected, or not in the mother's basements, maybe, camping in the street.
Yes, right.
But it's not in the numbers, because the numbers don't look at that.
Right.
Numbers only look at the people who say, I want a job. So participation rate is very low, and people say, oh, well, everybody's aging out. Well, no, really not. I mean, I think that there's an incredible number of people over 65 who are still working.
Oh, yeah.
And choosing to work. Some have to work, but some choose to work. So I think the participation rate is a very worrying factor to me. It has been for months, or actually for a year or two, or several years now, ever since the pandemic started. I don't think we're measuring, yet the full impact of the pandemic. And I think small business has been hurt very badly, and they are, at the end of the day, they are the furnace that bakes, the raw material for the economy, and I think they've been very badly hurt. So I think, yeah.
Yeah. So Larry, I don't know if you were on the show when I ran into the statistic on the small business association, not the national organization, not the federal one, but the I can't remember the darn name of it. Anyway, they did a survey. They do a survey every month with small business owners. And what they found is that only 2% of them were worried about being able to borrow money, that they either had enough money or they had plenty of capability to borrow. So I was shocked at that number.
But there's a lot of cash in in private hands, right? You established that some time ago, and that's where, that's the source of their comfort, right? The problem is that there isn't sufficient formation of small companies, and they aren't really expanding at the rate, or at the sort of minimal rate to get expansion. One of the reasons is that they're struggling to get labor.
Yeah, of course. Yes. No, I think it would have been a really bad time to start a business in the last couple of years. but I'm not sure that this generation, the current 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds are very entrepreneurial. I've not seen evidence that they are very entrepreneurial.
It's a huge problem, because only by being entrepreneurial are they going to be able to pay their own pensions.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Because we're going to use up all those pensions. So unless they actually spur massive growth, as happened when all the soldiers came back from World War II, they're going to be SOL.
Or immigration could bring those entrepreneurs in. He also nobody asked him which sectors are still an issue. They almost always ask him that question. I'll just fill in: housing and services. Housing continued to is been residential real estate, as I predicted and have said over and over again, went up all summer. It still went up last month, and it will stop going up now in the winter. But then it'll go back up again in the spring because there is no inventory. I think I've said that about 1,000 times now. And then travel related services, all the travel related services. Grandma and grandpa are still they're gonna travel like crazy this winter for Christmas. So if nobody buys any presents, at least the travel industries will do very well over the season. But those prices are crazy right now. Eating out is crazy. Traveling, going on an airplane any place is nuts.
Yeah. The level of inflation for those expenditures have gone up quite dramatically. Dramatically, but I think these, this is what happens in inflation. Inflation doesn't affect everybody equally.
Right.
It has these bumps, and so it's quite serious. But I think that the biggest issue is this formation of small companies and small businesses. I mean, it's hurting us a lot.
Yeah. So in summary, I thought it was optimistic. The market thought it was optimistic. The market seemed to like it a lot. Tesla stock did very well today, both in the regular market and in the after hours. We'll check it here in a second because that's what we do at the end of every show. And then there was one last note today. Construction spending came in 0.4% higher. And that was both in the public and the private sector, exactly the same number, 0.4%. So that was pretty strong for the construction market. And that, I believe, is 3 out of the last 4 months. It's been up like that. So that was pretty interesting.
Is most of it in single family homes at this point?
I think we'll see part of it's private and part of it's public. So I think a lot of it has to do with these two big bills, the IRA and the other, what was it called? It was the other big one. The infrastructure bill. So there is a lot of construction. Those apparently were some were able to be made shovel ready. So that's a big part of it. Let's see. We have Tesla ending up $2.34 over like a point, over 1% higher in the aftermarket.
They must have been listening to us.
They must have been. So at 208 at the end of the day, and the other Magnificent Seven all did well also. So that, but they not as well as Tesla in the aftermarket or the after hours market. And then we have Larry.
Do you think any of that had to do with Elon's interview?
Well, I said about a week ago, I think I said that I thought that Elon was lining up these interviews because it was going to be coincidental with the Cybertruck coming out. He's going to be on Lex Friedman. He was just on Rogan. He was at another show, another interview today. I think there's going to be a lot of PR between now and November 30th.
I thought his interview with Rogan was very strong.
Oh yeah, it was very good. Enjoyed it a lot. It was long, but and I'm never going to try that anchovy pizza because I'm not that guy. So the Dow futures are up. All the S&P futures up, just nominally 30%. I mean, 0.3, 0.2, 0.1. But up, right direction. Bitcoin up strongly again, back into 35.5 now. I don't understand that at all. So, don't ask me why. I have no clue.
I think we should start following gold.
I have been following gold on the morning.
Ah.
And we've been up as high as about 2020, almost 2100 now, and then it dropped all the way back down into the 18s. Now it's back up almost to the 2000s again, but I'm thinking that is maybe a flight to safety. And a little bit, I don't know, that's the best I can guess.
Yeah, it's kind of, it's a little bit of a canary in the coal mine.
Yeah.
And should watch it because, if things really get hairy globally, we'll see that move in the gold. So I think that needs to be followed quite closely together with some of the market moves.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
So it's at 1993 right now, so just under that 2000. Oil is playing around with getting into the 70s.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting because
that's pretty exciting. That's a good thing. And then treasuries, the 10-year is down at 4.724. And I have been predicting for a while that it's going to go to 4.25, but I think it'll have but I think it'll have a hard time getting below that number. That is kind of one of those stops. And I don't know, it'll take something more to get it to break below that.
But at 4.25, do you think the inversion goes away?
I don't know what's going to happen with that inversion, Larry. I can't figure out the inversion. I can't tell you how many articles. I don't think anybody has a clue why we've had this inversion now for 14 or 15 months. It doesn't seem to be related to the normal reasons. There's something else going on there, and it might have to do with some of these demographic things that I've been talking about, where you have a very different economy today. You have the average age getting close to 40 when it was under 30 when you and I were growing up. You've got the workers are older, way older than they've ever been. And you've got all this money. 50% of the money is sitting in the hands, the wealth is sitting in the hands of people over 55. That has to impact the way money is being saved, the way money is being invested, compared to when you have everybody under 30 years old.
Right. Well, yeah, I think we should be watching the V2, M2. We should be watching M2 and gold. I think it'll give us some insight into this. But look, we have a mini Goldilocks day. Who's complaining?
Enjoy it while it lasts.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Larry. We will see you Saturday morning this week. You will not be joining us Friday night for Good News Friday, but you'll be coming along on Saturday morning where we will go line by line on what it was that our good buddy, Cathie Wood, has to say on Friday night. What does she call it? She calls it Jobs Friday or something like that. I forget what she calls it.
Yeah, and it's good because I'm traveling all day Friday, so this gives me a easy, otherwise it would have been difficult to.
Yeah, I hear you. All right. So
great.
Thank you so much for being on. And to all of you out there, it has been great talking to you.